Watching News at Prime, let's bring you this conversation now. Chief Justice Mandisa Maya has announced the introduction of a sexual harassment policy for the South African judiciary. She says it aims to ensure accountability. Let's talk about this now. Judges Matter Co-ordinator Alison Tilley joining us for more. Alison, good evening to you. Thank you very much for your time. The announcement of the introduction of a dedicated system of trying to address sexual harassment within the judiciary. How important a step is that? We'll address the matters that then go deeper. But let's start with that announcement.
Well, I think it's very important. We've been, as Judges Matter, interested in this since the International Bar Association did a study on sexual harassment in the judiciary, and that was back in 2019. It's an area that's not necessarily one that you perhaps normally think about, but what we've seen over the last couple of years is really how important an issue it is and why it's necessary to tackle it. And certainly this policy is a very welcome step.
Yeah. And so there is a view already, Alison, that the mere announcement of a policy to address this may not be enough to address the scourge of sexual harassment. What do we know has been the system of reporting this, not only within the Judicial Service Commission, but also in the Magistrates Commission?
Well, I think the difficulty up to now is that it's really been treated like a complaint like any other. And those complaints would go to either the JSC or the Magistrates Commission, and they'd be dealt with in the ordinary way. It really then has also been something you would have to deal with under the General Code of Conduct for magistrates and for judges, for judicial officers. And I think we've seen that really is not adequate. So what we're looking at here is a special code of conduct and then also processes which will take, I think, dealing with the issue upper level.
So to address the systemic issues that go with sexual harassment, what needs to be done? What steps can be followed in order to ensure that, yes, the announcement is one thing, but actually making sure that this is a system that works? Those steps have got to be followed.
Well, I think there's a very innovative idea in the policy, which is to look at a gender desk in the Office of the Chief Justice, which will have a couple of functions, a sort of an oversight role to some extent, just monitoring what is happening, but also supporting complainants with different kinds of processes, because there's not a one-size-fits-all. Some people want to lodge a complaint. Some people simply want it made known that they're having these difficulties. Some people would like a mediation process. So it's really quite flexible. It's innovative, and I think it's certainly only going to come on stream over the next couple of months. So it's not going to start tomorrow in a fully fledged form, but it's the beginning, and then we should see building blocks over time.
An interesting proposal here is that of the establishment of an external independent body, and this will be a body that will comprise retired judges, lawyers, civil society organizations, and others who will be trained in trauma center approaches. How important will that be? Is that something that has to form part of the layers here?
Well, I think one of the things that we know is that people don't necessarily understand sexual harassment. I mean, we all have our different areas of work, and we don't necessarily focus on these things. And I think what is really intended seems to be a very proactive approach to try and make sure that there is training, there's awareness, there's discussion, so that while you are on the one hand trying to enforce the system of complaints, you're also making sure that there is an opportunity for people to educate themselves and educate others on what sexual harassment can look like, because I think that's often something that I think is the subject of discussion. What exactly is sexual harassment? What is the behavior that we're concerned about? So that's an attempt to really go on the front foot with that.
Yeah. And perhaps to use a living example of this, I mean, we can look no further than the Benen Judicial Conduct Tribunal regulating the conduct of a judge as senior as Judge Benen. How intimidating can that be? And what do you think are the lessons, some of the lessons that can be drawn from this experience?
I think that's one of the things that the policy is really, very clear on, which is this question of, what happens when it's a very junior person who's the subject of the harassment. It's very difficult under those circumstances to speak up, and I think for various reasons, also just you're worried about your job, and I think this policy indicates that there will be mechanisms that you can follow, which don't necessarily mean that you have to confront the person who's harassing you. And I think that's really useful, because you're then in a position where you can do something without having to maybe challenge your boss, and not just your boss, but the leader. In that example would be the leader in a division. So that's giving people different ways of approaching it. And I think that's certainly very useful.
Yeah. Final question, Alison. How important a milestone is this under the stewardship of Justice Mandisamaya?
Well, I think it's very significant that this policy comes out, and not just that it comes out on Women's Day. And I think it's one of the things that perhaps we can say about women leadership. Sometimes we ask, what is the benefit of having women leaders? And I think you see it here in operation, where something that is of concern, not just to women in the profession, but obviously largely a concern to women, is being dealt with so proactively and innovatively by the first woman Chief Justice and the first Black woman Chief Justice.
Alison Tilley, thank you very much for your time and insights here. She is the coordinator at Judges Matter.